For many centuries, London was a dangerous place. It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines. But he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere. But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the country's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
Female defendant.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire for gruesome stories of London's dark side. On the morning of the 13th of July, 1955, Ruth Ellis was readied for execution in the condemned cell at Holloway Prison. She dressed in her own clothes, ate a small breakfast under the supervision of her female guards, and counted down the few minutes remaining before 9 a.m.
There was outrage at the execution. There were a lot of persons who didn't agree with it.
Thousands of people signed a petition asking and begging for Ruth Ellis to be reprieved.
There were lots of people who wrote personally to the Home Secretary expressing their feelings about the case.
The judge himself wrote to the Home Secretary saying that he should consider giving a reprieve.
The public, generally speaking, did not like to see women being executed.
There were some people who thought she got what she deserved and that she was a cold-blooded killer.
Ruth Ellis was at the forefront of public consciousness, and petitions to halt her execution had been organized by passionate members of the public. They took it upon themselves to gain as many signatures as possible in the hope that the Home Secretary would grant a reprieve. Many were still out on the morning of the execution, tirelessly collecting signatures. For in their eyes, the justice system which had served the country for centuries was not fit for this modern era.
Hello, sir. Would you like to sign this petition? Hello. Would you like to sign this petition? It's for Ruth Ellis. Hello, sir. Sign a petition for Ruth Ellis. Hello. Would you like to sign this petition? Hello, sir. Would you like to sign this petition? It's against the hanging of Ruth Ellis. Hello, ladies. Did you know that Ruth Ellis actually had a 10-year-old boy? Hello, sir. Sign a petition for Ruth Ellis.
Ticket, please, sir.
I do apologise, I've only just bought it.
That's quite all right, sir. We're running late anyway.
Oh, really?
Signal failure. We may be here for some time, sir.
I never put it in there.
Always losing things in pockets myself. Thank you, sir.
It's one of those mornings for all of us, it seems.
At least we know someone's having a worse day. Tickets, please.
Hello, Mum. Are you against hanging? Hello, sir. Sign the petition for Ruth Ellis. Sign the petition.
Sorry?
The petition for Ruth Ellis.
It's a little late, isn't it? She'll be hanged in 15 minutes.
Yeah, but it's to tell the government how people feel.
Sorry.
What's been done to her is a disgrace. Tell me why you and everyone else on this train thinks it's all right to hang a 28-year-old mum.
Well, Mrs. Ellis had a fair trial. And she was convicted of murder by the jury, and we hang murderers in this country. The law couldn't be clearer.
Her son is 10 years old.
And I sympathise with him.
And yet you'd still send his mum to be hanged.
You may not like it, but the law is the law. We're all born equal under it.
Do you even know where she was born?
No, I don't. But I imagine it would be better for all concerned if she'd stayed there.
Ruth was born on the 9th of October 1926 in Rhyl, a working-class seaside town in North Wales. Ruth's mother was a Belgian refugee and her father played in the orchestras on Atlantic cruises. Hers was a traditional Catholic upbringing. But the stable family home Ruth was born into soon unraveled. Ruth's uncle was killed in a car crash in 1928, and her baby brother tragically died the following year. Her father numbed his grief with alcohol. He became a violent and abusive drunk. Unable to hold down a job, he uprooted the family again and again. Finally, in 1940, they moved to London.
These were the war years, so the move seemed somewhat surprising, but nonetheless it happened.
By 1944, he managed to get a job as a chauffeur in Southwark. He was lucky enough to get a flat that came with the job, so that's why they moved up there.
The teenage Ruth threw herself into London life. She didn't let the Blitz hold her back. She delighted in visiting cafes and dancing in nightclubs until the early hours. In 1943, she met a Canadian soldier called Claire Andrea McCallum and fell in love. She soon became pregnant, and McCallum asked her to marry him. Ruth began excited preparations for the wedding and their new life with the baby. What Ruth didn't know was that McCallum already had a wife and 3 children back home in Quebec. Soon after the war ended, with their son not yet 9 months old, she discovered the truth. Ruth was heartbroken. She swore she would never let another man hurt her like that again. But life for a single mother in post-war London was not easy. Jobs were scarce, and rationing was still brutal. Ruth could not afford to be picky. She responded to an advert for evening work as a model at the Camera Club near Bond Street. It was through the Camera Club that she met Maurice Conley. He posed as a respectable businessman, but was in fact the biggest vice boss in the city. He invited Ruth to become a hostess at one of his nightclubs.
London in those days was full of nightclubs. The pubs had a very strict closing times, and so nightclubs catered for the late-night drinking clients. And, of course, it was also linked with the sex trade as well. There would be all sorts of types who would be visiting those clubs so you never quite knew who you were dealing with.
Their clientele certainly included a lot of men who were very privileged, who were sort of upper middle class, upper class, and frequented these clubs as part of their leisure time and enjoyment.
The club owner, he actually encouraged it and encouraged relationships with the customers. This was a way of bringing more money. So there was a lot of money floating around.
Her duties at the club were simple. Look pretty, entertain guests, and have sex with whoever Connolly told her to, including himself.
So she was a good time girl.
It was the work she could get.
There was no shop or factory that would take her.
What is it you do?
I work in insurance.
And how'd you get that job then?
Well, after leaving university, this was before the war, there was a connection I had with the firm.
Let me guess. A friend of your father's. Ruth's dad was an unemployable drunk.
I recognized that I was fortunate. Were there really no alternatives to her?
She tried to live respectfully. Even married a fella. For all the good it did her.
And that was Mr. Ellis, I presume?
Yeah. He was a drunk and all. And a dentist. Even worse.
So what became of him? Why didn't it last?
He bashed her about. She left.
By 1953, Ruth had a new name and a new daughter. Both were courtesy of a failed marriage to a drunk. It was in this year, too, that she first dyed her hair that famous platinum blonde. She was now Ruth Ellis, the woman who would grace 1,000 front pages. In August 1953, Ruth Ellis became manager of the Little Club in Knightsbridge. It was another Maurice Connolly establishment. But Ruth was proud that at 26 years old, she was the youngest club manager in London. After a series of false starts and false hopes, Ruth's life finally seemed on track. The first customer through the door was a lean and handsome young man. He was an aspiring race car driver with the family money to match his looks. His name was David Blakely. Within 2 years, David would be dead, and Ruth would be awaiting execution in Holloway Prison for his murder.
There's a telephone inside, in case they change their minds, right?
Yeah, I'm certain there will be, yes. She seems quite reconciled to it, I read. As far as one can tell.
Said she wants to be together again.
With?
Yeah. With him.
Ruth Ellis started an affair with David Blakely, and I think initially they were actually sort of besotted with one another.
David Blakely was a young man who was from quite a privileged social background, more privileged than Ruth Ellis's background, from a higher social class, and obviously within the context of the time that would have been perceived as quite significant.
Ellis falls for him in a big, big way. Blakely moves in with her. It was a club lifestyle. It was drinks, it was parties. There's this tremendous sense of liberation and sort of, you can do anything. There was a certain freedom about. Domesticity was not something that was normally considered.
They enthusiastically fell in love with each other, but it wasn't long before they were each having affairs.
They were both jealous people. David still pursued other women, and Ruth was the center of attention at her club. But if their similarities caused arguments, so did the couple's differences. They came from different social worlds. David had no qualms in taking Ruth to bed, but he did not dare introduce her to his mother. And Ruth felt looked down upon by David's friends. For they were used to a social circle of the same class of people, and openly mocked the working-class girl from North Wales.
They shouldn't have been rude. No excuse for that. But I can understand if there were suspicions. Someone like him with someone like...
What? Someone like me?
They came from very different backgrounds.
So she was just some poor tart.
I didn't say that. But people were bound to wonder why they were together. Do you not believe there's the slightest possibility of some ulterior motive on her behalf?
You think she was just after his money?
Wow. Is it so far-fetched?
What about Desmond Cousin?
Oh, the other chap.
He was rich, he wanted to marry her. So why didn't she just go off with him if that was what she wanted?
Ruth had, in fact, met Desmond Cusson before Blakely. Cusson was on the fringes of the racing set who stalked the little club. The 30-year-old was shy, well-mannered, and utterly in love with Ruth. He longed to break her away from David and marry her himself.
Desmond Cusson was born and brought up in Leatherhead in Surrey. He was a rich, unassuming accountant, and he was a director of a firm of tobacconists.
Blakely encourages the relationship with Cusson, who was an ex-Lancaster pilot, and his family were in the cigarettes and retail distribution, so he had quite a bit of money. But although Ellis is willing to have an affair and become Cusson's mistress, she is still very much in love with Blakely.
By late 1954, Ruth and David's relationship had turned ugly. David soaked all his money and efforts into racing. He increasingly relied on Ruth for financial support. She gave him drinks at the little club, allowed him to stay in her flat free of charge.
I think when young women at her age found themselves in London, it was sometimes quite difficult for them to make their own way unless they had attached themselves to a respectable man who would give them a proper home.
One of the things that's perhaps worth remembering about Ruth is that because she had become a mother when she wasn't married and when she was young, that automatically, in the context of the time we're talking about, made life quite difficult for women. They did run the risk of losing their job if it was known that they'd had the child out of marriage. So there were a variety of other types of employment that they might need to engage in.
She definitely liked the glamour, and she loved the fast cars and mixing with rich people and the aristocracy. And during that time, she clearly felt that people appreciated her, and she was beginning to feel like a somebody.
This passionate affair would soon sour, as occasional acts of domestic violence by Blakely would become routine. The uglier and more abusive the relationship became, however, the harder it seemed for either to break free. They loved and hated one another. Their bitter arguments and passionate reconciliations swallowed up their whole lives. It destroyed Ruth's success at the little club, too. Customers were put off by the couple's constant public rows. Takings more than halved, infuriating the owner, Maurice Connolly. In December 1954, Ruth lost her job and the flat that came with it. Homeless and jobless, she moved in temporarily with Desmond Cusson, but still she did not give up on David. The relationship continued, and so did the violence. Early in 1955, Ruth began French lessons in an attempt to impress David and his upper-class friends. The tutor later recalled her students' black eyes and bruised limbs. Ruth, she thought, was a woman on the verge of a breakdown.
I can't help questioning her taste in men.
Well, no argument there.
What I don't understand, though, is if it was as bad as you imply, with the violence and unpleasantness, the misery, why did she stay?
It's not as simple as that.
Could you not just leave him? Cut him off? Never see him again?
When you know something's bad, getting away from it can seem even worse. Anyway, she couldn't. He wouldn't let her. Blakely said if she left, he'd kill her. And I reckon he would as well.
It would be Ellis, however, who would end up awaiting execution for murder. Her 2 children would be left without a mother, and all the hopes and dreams she worked towards would be destroyed. The difficult life which Ruth tried to overcome would eventually catch up with her, and all she could do is sit and wait for the inevitable end. By early 1955, the alcohol-fueled affair between Ruth Ellis and David Blakely had turned violent. The relationship had cost the 28-year-old woman her job and her home. Ruth's future with David looked grim, but she could imagine no other. In February, she left the home of her friend Desmond Cusson with her 10-year-old son and moved to a small bedsit in Kensington. She hoped David would join her there. Ruth began her new life in Egerton Gardens, and Blakely would from time to time stay, but with him came the arguments and violence. In an attempt to help Ruth, Cusson lent her money to attend a modelling course in central London. But this attempt to restart her life was soon derailed. Ruth found out she was pregnant. David was the father, but it did nothing to change the course of their relationship.
She then moved in with Desmond Cusson at Goodwood Court in his flat there. And from time to time, she did a bit of modelling with the Cherry Marshall School of Modelling. Not terribly successfully. I can remember reading a book by Cherry Marshall saying that whenever Ruth Ellis turned up, she got bruises all over her body.
During another drunken argument, David punched Ruth in the stomach. She lost the baby. The miscarriage made Ruth ill. As Easter approached, she was confined to bed with a fever and deeply depressed. At this stage, David's friends, Ant and Carol Findlater, decided to intervene. They'd always disliked Ruth and long urged David to end his romance with a lower-class girl. Now they resolved to keep the couple apart over the long Easter weekend.
At about 10 o'clock in the morning, on Good Friday, Blakely left their serviced room in Egerton Gardens, telling Ruth that he would be back later in the day. He didn't come back.
Blakely had gone out with some friends, and she thought that he was perhaps romantically involved with one of these friends, and she was unhappy about this. She actually herself spent the weekend with Desmond Cusson. They're both sort of spending time together, drinking quite heavily together.
In the early hours of Easter Sunday, she returned home to the tiny bedsit in Kensington. She sat in the darkness by her sleeping son, thought about her life, about her drunk and violent father, her drunk and violent husband, and her drunk and violent boyfriend. It was then that a new and peculiar feeling took hold of her. She realized she wanted to kill David.
Ruth spent a lot of time with Desmond's cousin, and it would seem that he was winding her up like a corkscrew.
It's in this point that he gives her a gun. He shows her how to shoot. And you've got to look at Cousin's motive for this. Is it a way of eliminating the rival and punishing the girl?
That evening on Easter Sunday, Ruth took her son home to Kensington. She tucked him up in bed before changing. She then kissed the boy goodnight and, telling him she wouldn't be long, slipped out of the flat. Her son would never see Ruth again. Ruth left her bedsit and travelled to Tanser Road in Hampstead, where she believed Blakely would be. The Finlaters were hosting another party that night, but by 9 p.m, they were running low on cigarettes. David volunteered to visit the Magdala pub by Hampstead Heath Station and fetch some. He could buy more drink while he was there too. Another partygoer, Clive Gunnell, accompanied him. The pair left in David's car for the short drive.
She watched the house. She saw David come out with his friend Gunnell, get in a car and drive away. Now, the thing is that between Tanser Road, where she was, and the Magdala, where David was going to, it was a little bit of a drive. So she couldn't really have had any knowledge of where they were going. They could have been going anywhere. But when she walked back down the road, presumably she saw his car parked outside the Magdala.
Ruth lurked in the street, pacing up and down outside the pub, waiting for David to emerge. She didn't have to wait long. At 9:20 p.m, David and Clive exited the pub. David stepped over to his car, groping for his keys with 3 large bottles of beer clutched to his chest.
She fired 6 shots. 4 of them hit him directly and killed him. 1 of them missed. 1 of them ricocheted and hit a passerby.
Blakely starts running. She goes after him, fires again, he falls down. And then she stands over him and empties the gun into his back.
Ruth stepped away from the body and raised the gun to her temple. She could not pull the trigger. She lowered the revolver and fired the last round off into the pavement. Then she turned to Clive Gunnell and told him to call the police. Ruth's arrest was inevitable. An off-duty police constable, Alan Thompson, was sat in the corner of the Magdala pub when the shooting started. He pushed his way through the crowd of witnesses. Outside, he found Ruth Ellis standing over the body of her lover, David Blakely. The gun was still in her hand. Beer bottles lay shattered all around. The glass shone wet with beer and blood. Gently, the policeman took the gun away from Ruth. She did not resist. And at no point did she deny her involvement. On Easter Monday, Ruth was charged with David's murder. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, she told a policewoman. I will hang for this.
Was it the idea of parting from him that she couldn't bear?
She loved him. And he took everything from her. Then laughed about it with his mates.
But for all her unhappiness, which I recognise was considerable, this was no act of sudden passion.
Oh, she suffered abuse for years.
And had time to think. Which is my point. She took a gun. She followed Blakely. First to the house, then to this pub. And she waited for him there. For how long? 10 minutes? Longer? She chose to kill him. To stand closer than you and I are now. And empty her gun into him.
During the Easter weekend of 1955, Ruth Ellis's life had reached breaking point. Her lover, David Blakely, had disappeared with friends, and she spent the weekend drinking with her ex-lover, Desmond Cusson. She was certain that Blakely was having an affair, and fueled by jealousy and drink, she sought him out, armed with a gun provided by Cusson. She shot Blakely multiple times and was arrested shortly after. Ruth knew her actions that fateful night would ultimately lead to her execution. Her certainty may have been misplaced. 2 decades earlier, a woman was put on trial for a similar crime. In 1932, Elvira Barney, a London socialite, was tried for the murder of her boyfriend. After a loud argument in which Elvira threatened to shoot him, he was found dead with a gunshot wound to the chest. Elvira insisted it was an accident. She was threatening suicide, she said, and her boyfriend tried to stop her. During a tussle over the weapon, the gun accidentally discharged and delivered the fatal injury. The jury believed her. She was found not guilty. Soon after the verdict, Elvira was back on the dance floor at her favorite Café de Paris in central London. "Take a good look at me," she exclaimed to the crowds. "I'm the one who shot her lover." Like Ruth, Elvira was only in her 20s. Like Ruth, she was a fixture of London nightlife. And, like Ruth, she had a tempestuous, alcohol-fueled relationship with a man killed. But unlike Ruth, Elvira was a wealthy member of the social elite. What would the court in public make of a working-class girl like Ruth? Her trial began at the Old Bailey on the 20th of June, 1955.
When she went to court, there was tremendous hostility towards her, the good time girl, the tart. And she is subjected to one of the most devastating cross-examinations ever. Prosecution counsel asked her one question. It's unique, just one question. When you stood over the body of David Blakely and fired into his body, what did you intend to do? I intended to kill him. Counsel sat down. You've got the guilty intent, you've got the physical act. You don't have to prove anything more, and that is murder.
Whether it means that she wanted to be found guilty, I think, is a difficult question to answer, but she said it was obvious that she'd intended to kill him. She said this in court. And I think it shows that she was answering very honestly. Of course, that doesn't necessarily benefit you if you're on trial for murder, but she was certainly willing to give honest answers to the questions, and some of those, perhaps it meant that she was then perceived, certainly in relation to the criminal justice system and the legal process, quite negatively.
I don't think she had any doubts in her mind that she had intended to kill. And my guess is that in her own mind, she was justified in killing him because of the way that she perceived that he had been treating her. So I don't think that she was in any way looking to be regarded as innocent of the act of shooting him.
By then, a fiction had been presented in the press, David as the well-educated son of privilege, led astray by the peroxide blonde charms of the social climbing lower class. David's own violence and jealousy were ignored. Ruth's defense did little to correct these misconceptions. Prosecution witnesses were barely cross-examined, and Ruth's barristers seemed squeamish about revealing David's true nature. Instead, they depicted the murder as an act of typical female hysteria.
Men don't get called hysterical.
Well, as a rule, no. But we are perhaps less prone to the... I mean...
How was David Blakely not hysterical when he was waiting in her club all evening, picking fights with any man that even looked at her? How was George Ellis not hysterical, calling her 10 times a day after she left? What's the difference? Because they were men? Oh no, it's a woman. She must be jealous or hysterical. Women can't control themselves when they're jealous. Her defence said that. They didn't even look into that gun. Never even asked her how she got it or who taught her how to use it. And the fact that she was hospitalised from the beatings that he gave her, she lost a baby. She was sick for weeks and the jury heard none of it.
Mrs. Ellis may have been better off with you as an advocate.
Couldn't have been worse. They were looking out for their own. They didn't want to know what decent boy Blakely was really like.
The mystery of how she obtained the freshly oiled and loaded gun was left unexplored. The prolonged physical abuse she suffered was not made clear to the jury, and there was little effort to explain her complex emotions on the night of the murder.
They'd made no effort to discredit prosecution case and would subject the witnesses of the prosecution to a minimum of cross-examination. It's obvious that evidence about the gun was nowhere near detailed enough for any balanced jury to convict upon, and any competent lawyer would have played on the fact that the ballistics had not been carried out on the gun. Too many crucial questions were left unasked.
There's always a temptation to think, well, could her trial have been done differently? But the defence get one go at it, and they have to decide how to work their defence. But of course, that first question asked by the prosecuting counsel, why did you do it? She said, I wanted to kill him, and she did. So really, she was convicted because of what she herself had said at her trial, quite voluntarily.
After less than half an hour's deliberation, the jury found Ruth guilty. She was sentenced to death. In 1955, however, opposition to the death penalty in Britain was growing. A royal commission had already investigated the practice and concluded it offered little deterrent to crime. Prominent miscarriages of justice had shocked the nation, and even those in favour of capital punishment often hesitated at the thought of executing a woman. A campaign for clemency was launched on Ruth's behalf. Petitions urging a reprieve gained thousands of signatures around the world. But Ruth herself had no desire to escape execution. She just wanted to be with David again. The Home Secretary, too, saw no reason for the law not to take its course. There would be no reprieve.
I'm sorry.
Sign the petition.
We should be moving off very shortly, sir.
Sign it.
Is this young lady bothering you, sir?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Do you have a ticket, miss?
Yeah, it's here.
Can you step this way, please?
I have it.
You've been bothering this gentleman quite enough.
I have it.
Excuse me. It's here. It's on your clipboard.
Be more careful in future, miss. Sir?
Thank you.
Hand me the petition.
Thanks.
Ruth's death strengthened public opinion against the death penalty. Within a decade, the practice would end in Great Britain. The prejudices of sex and class that helped send Ruth to the gallows, however, would prove far more stubborn. For many centuries, Britain was a dangerous place. It was a magnet for the very worst kind of people. Jack the Ripper dominated the headlines, but he wasn't the only killer around. Murder was afoot. The fear of death was everywhere. But police had their work cut out to track the culprits down. In this series, we'll be investigating some of the country's most notorious and intriguing crimes.
Female defendant.
Sexual intrigue, vicious murder, as well as the latest technology, fed the nation's insatiable desire for gruesome stories of Britain's dark side. In the parts of Scotland that were his hunting ground, the name of Peter Manuel can still elicit a shudder. He was, as Manuel described himself, the foulest beast on earth. Scotland's largest city was once one of Europe's major ports. During the Victorian era, its population exploded due to its booming industries and abundance of jobs. The two world wars impacted greatly on this once magnificent metropolis, and by the 1950s it was a city down on its luck. High unemployment, soaring crime, deprivation and poverty would all take their toll on its inhabitants.
Everything about it was black, so it was like the ultimate noir city. People were living in appalling housing, all on top of one another. There were no bathrooms, houses were being chucked up. You could actually kick your way through walls because the building standard was so low.
Glasgow at that time was starting to undergo a period of change in relation to housing, slum clearance, tower blocks beginning to be built. There'd still be some of the local communities in and around Glasgow retain their own sense of identity. And it was in one of those that Peter Manuel lived with his parents.
Peter Manuel met a girl named Anna O'Hara. They were set to get married in the summer of 1955. Everything seemed to be going well for the happy couple, but all was not what it seemed.
She was what's known as a clippy. She was a bus conductress. She and her mother were treated to the charming side of Peter's psychopathy. And he was very attentive. He was a complete gentleman.
They were just about to get engaged, and she started to receive anonymous letters about Peter Manuel saying, "You don't know who you're engaged to. You don't know this man. He has a terrible dark past."
She wanted him to go to confession to make sure that he was on the road to respectability. And when he wouldn't do so, she refused to go through with the marriage.
The engagement was called off, and it turns out that the letters were from Peter Manuel. And he said later about it that he didn't know why he had done that. And I think there was a spark of decency in Peter Manuel. He spent all his time amongst criminal types. You know, there's lots of stories about him carousing around Glasgow with wild people. But he said later he really liked that girl, and he maybe knew deep down that things were going to go really badly wrong and didn't want to implicate her in it.
The same day that he was supposed to have got married, he takes his revenge.
Late that evening, 29-year-old Mary McLachlan was making her way home from a dance. She had almost made it when Peter Manuel rushed out from the darkness and grabbed her. He had a knife and forced her over a barbed wire fence into a field. At knife point, he sexually assaulted her, but instead of killing her, he eventually let her go.
Mary's screams for help were heard, however. The police were called, but despite searchers coming within yards of them, Manuel and Mary were undiscovered. He didn't kill Mary, however. Her terror had been enough to satisfy him. Eventually, he let her go. Her ordeal had lasted hours, and it was far from over. Mary went to the police, and Manuel was arrested.
The charge of rape was brought against him. A date for the trial was set, and without formal training or actual knowledge of the legal system, Manuel decided to defend himself.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you've heard the fine words from my esteemed colleague from the prosecution. You've heard from my accuser, and you've heard from the police. Now, it's time for you to hear the truth. Mary and I have been pals for a long time. More than pals, in fact. And it was earlier on the 30th that we met. We were taking my dog for a walk. We had a wee lover's tiff. We scuffled. She cut her lip. I'm no proud of myself. And I said sorry right away. And I say it again to you today. Mary, I am sorry. We made up, and I said, let's go and take a look at those snares, for rabbits. So we go to the field. Now, to get in, you have to clamber over some barbed wire. She got another wee cut. She was really in the wars that night. Anyway, there were no rabbits. So, we sat down, had a smoke. And then, we see this rain coming. And suddenly Rusty, that's my dog, he goes chasing after it, like it's a wee cat. I had to do something. So I took out my knife, and I'm no denying I had it. And I lobbed it in the other direction to try and distract him. That knife saved my dog. I'm no blaming Mary for this. You tell a tale, and before you know it, the fibs, they get bigger and bigger, and you can't stop. But I'm telling you, I did not do this.
I think he chose to represent himself because he was arrogant. He's callous, he's cruel, he likes to intimidate.
It was obviously something he'd fantasised about and thought about in the way that some of us might fantasise about being on a chat show. He fantasised about being a lawyer in court and doing a better job.
Manuel believed he was better than the system and was certainly capable of taking on the system.
The wee man against the world sort of thing. And the jury warmed to it.
To the truth, for it shall set you free. You get your brains from your father.
Aye, get my looks from my ma, though.
I didn't know how you managed up there. I'd be too frightened.
Hold the truth, ma.
You showed that girl what was what.
Gives another blast of that, would you?
Go on, then.
If ever I see that girl round here, I'll be giving her a piece of my mind. You can't slander the manuals and get away with it. Cheers! Yes.
In his eyes, Manuel had proved his genius in court. He was not like other men. The rules did not apply to him. Nobody could stop him now. Manuel was born in New York in 1927, but his father's attempt at the American dream was unsuccessful. The family moved back across the Atlantic when Manuel was just a child. They settled permanently near Glasgow in 1945. By then, the teenage Peter Manuel had found alternative accommodation of his own. At the age of 16, he'd been sent to Boston, a corrective school for young delinquents. Manuel had turned to crime early. As the years went by, he graduated to more and more serious offences. In 1946, he was arrested on 15 charges of housebreaking. While on bail paid for by his father, Manuel then sexually assaulted 3 women in less than a week. Caught and convicted of rape, he was sentenced to 9 years in jail. Manuel had grown into a man with a fierce temper and a fiercer sense of his own superiority. He was a fantasist, boasting to fellow prisoners that he was a champion boxer, that his father was a mobster.
He had a lot of time to fantasise because he spent so much time sitting in cells.
Manuel had gone to the American consul in Glasgow. He said he had something of grave importance to American national security. To his amazement, perhaps, they believed him. He was flown to Ruislip. The FBI interviewed him and said, the man's a fantasist.
Told stories like he was on a plane and the plane couldn't land and he managed to land the plane even though he'd never been in a plane or flown a... I mean, they were not very good stories.
Manuel may have been living in a world of fantasy,
But his actions most definitely had lasting consequences in real life. One afternoon in early 1956, a man was out walking his dogs across East Kilbride Golf Course when he spotted something. It was a girl lying on the ground near the 5th tee. At first, he thought she was sunbathing, but he soon discovered the truth. The body was identified as 17-year-old Anne Nealons. She'd been missing for 2 days. The killer, police determined, had spent some time with the body after death, rearranging it, glorying in what he'd done.
Annie Nealons was a nice, ordinary girl, just embarking upon her life. And she happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time.
What we can trace from the forensics was she ran for a mile to get away from this person. She lost shoes. I mean, it must have been a frantic run.
Part of his makeup is suggested that he likes inflicting the terror. This gives him a sexual high.
Eventually he catches her and he bludgeons her with a big bit of metal.
The investigation soon focused on Peter Manuel. At the time of the murder, he was working with the gas board on a site next to the golf course. When police came asking for information, he made sure they remembered him, as if he was trying to cultivate suspicion. 10 days after the body was found, police interviewed Manuel at his work, and at the same time, other officers called in on the family home.
Thank you, Mr. Manuel.
So, what's all this about then?
We're establishing the whereabouts of your son Peter on the night of the 2nd of January.
Well, he was here.
The whole night?
Aye.
Is that your recollection as well, Mrs. Manuel?
You didn't think he had anything to do with that girl?
We're exploring all lines of inquiry.
He was in that night, though, wasn't he? She wakes every time the door goes.
A light sleeper.
And that morning after, you said how well you'd kept.
That's right.
It's fortunate you have such a keen memory, Mr. Manuel.
Aye, it is.
Anne Nealons' parents drove past the golf course that night. They'll live knowing their daughter was dead or dying right there as they drove. I know you have a daughter.
Don't you bring Teresa into this.
I have a daughter myself, Mr. Manuel. We have to find the man who did this.
Not my Peter. He's a good boy.
Now you've heard her. Peter was here all night. There's your whereabouts for you.
My colleagues will be in touch should we have any further questions.
I'll see you out.
Thank you for the tea, Mrs. Manuel.
Naturally, they had some loyalty towards the son that they would have loved, despite his criminal conduct.
Like a lot of people who commit appalling crimes, the last bastion of decency is you're loyal to your family. And it's really over-amplified.
Manuel had long been obsessed with gangsters. He yearned for acceptance from the bigwigs of Glasgow's underworld.
He knew the life stories of Dillinger, Capone, and Babyface Nelson and people like that. And I think that gave him comfort, because he was able to say, there are people in this world that I can identify with.
He spent spent time with and sought out the company of people who would have in their day been recognised as significant criminal players. Very quickly they came to realise that they couldn't trust Manuel.
Being a mobster is about being part of a collective, and he was never ever part of a collective.
He was flamboyant. He attracted attention. The last thing any professional criminal wants is somebody who does grandstanding performances and draws attention to himself.
In March 1956, he teamed up with another low-level criminal. Their plan was to rob the canteen of a nearby coal mine, but police were tipped off. Both men were arrested and bailed. A trial date was set for that October. In the next 6 months of freedom, Manuel would be busy. Over the summer, he committed a string of minor thefts and break-ins, but as his likely incarceration drew closer, Manuel became bolder.
Peter's still out. It's getting on. Did he say he'd be so late? I think I'll make up his bed for him.
Bridget.
My luck, he'll walk in the moment I'm finished.
You let me read my paper in peace. If he gets back late, he can make his own bed. He's a grown man.
On the morning of September the 9th, 1956, Peter Manuel broke into the Watt home. He shot Marion in the head. Her sister was visiting and asleep beside her. Manuel shot her twice. Then he went to the room of 16-year-old Vivian. She had been woken by the gunshots and put up a fight. Manuel beat her unconscious, tied her up, and shot her. He then left, taking nothing. Manuel was initially a suspect, but the investigation veered off track. The grieving William Watt was accused instead. He had told police he was 90 miles distant when the killings occurred, but two witnesses insisted they'd seen him elsewhere that morning. By now, Manuel had been convicted and jailed for the break-in at the coal mine. But for his more serious crimes, an innocent man now faced the gallows. Manuel never liked others getting attention for his work. From his prison cell, he saw William Watt accused of the murders he had committed.
He reached out to Watt's solicitor. He had information, he said. Could they meet? The risk of incriminating himself was nothing next to the thrill of reliving his crimes. But Manuel's arrogance and need for attention helped save William Watt. The solicitor badgered police to look at Manuel again, for despite their best efforts, investigators had found little to pin the murders on Watt. No weapon and no motive.
When they investigated it fully, they realised it was impossible for him to have done that. His car hadn't left the car park. It was covered in frost.
The sister-in-law's children still believe that William Watt had something to do with it. Other people think it's an outrage to even suggest that.
William Watt definitely didn't commit these murders. Some people to this day say he helped organise the whole thing, but I don't think there's any mileage in that at all.
I'm always inclined to believe that it was more complicated than a nut job went crazy.
Peter Manuel would have to wait nearly another year. He emerged from Barlini prison on the 30th of November, 1957.
There's trifle left if you're still hungry.
I'm sorry I didn't come up with that mass mark. Happy Christmas.
You didn't have to do that.
What kind of son do you think I am?
You'll come next year, won't you? Yes.
I promise.
Oh, it's beautiful. Thank you. You are a good boy. You are.
His parents hoped he was a reformed man, still young enough to turn his life around. Those generous presents, however, were all things he'd stolen. And just 3 days after Christmas, Manuel killed again. 17-year-old Isabel Cook left her home at 6:45 p.m. on the 28th of December 1957. Within minutes, she was dead. Peter Manuel had returned to the scene of one of his earliest crimes. In March 1946, he'd attacked a young mother out walking with her child. Now, in the darkness of the same footpath, he killed Isabel.
This is what arouses him. The stalk, the chase, the rape, the kill. It's all part of that violent behaviour.
He didn't like to stray too far from home. He liked to be in areas that he was familiar with, comfortable with. Whether that was because he felt he could go there and leave with a better chance of avoiding sight or avoiding capture, that would be guesswork. But all along, Manuel repeated what he did.
I think he chose the same location. It's sort of almost like a shout of triumph. I did it once here before, I can do it here again.
To the agony of her parents, her body would not be found for almost 3 weeks. In the meantime, her killer would strike again. Less than a mile away from where Manuel had killed Isabel Cook, the Smart family were celebrating. After sending their 10-year-old son to bed, Peter and Doris Smart had seen in the new year with the customary whiskey. At around 2:30 a.m., neighbours saw them switch off the lights. During the week, they had lain undiscovered. Manuel had returned repeatedly to the house. He had eaten their food, slept on their couch, and fed their pet cat. Stealing the family's car, he even felt confident enough to stop and give a policeman a lift. How clever Manuel must have felt. How invincible. This time, however, he had made a mistake. On the day before he was murdered, Peter Smart went to the bank. He had received his monthly wages and withdrew £35 in crisp new notes. Smart folded them into his wallet and went home to begin the New Year celebrations.
Mr. Smart had cash in his pocket, and Peter Manuel took the cash and went off and got drunk.
He was singing songs, he was paying people into dances, he was getting taxis. He was on a real high.
He's showing off to everybody in the pub, and he's saying, look at these sequentially numbered notes. He's a criminal mastermind.
He just thought he was clever enough to get away with it all.
When the Smart family were eventually discovered, the police automatically suspected Manuel. They'd also learned that Manuel had suddenly come into money on New Year's Day. Investigators tracked the notes he used. Their serial numbers matched those belonging to Peter Smart. At last, police had evidence linking Manuel to the crime. Police had proof that linked Manuel to the multiple murders of the Smart family, but they needed more. Many hours were spent following leads and looking for further, more incriminating evidence.
I don't think there's any doubt that in the police inquiry, although they were pretty sure by this time, the one thing the police could not afford was for Manuel to walk. That would have been fairly catastrophic.
The police go to the house and search the house, and they find a pair of gloves that have been stolen, and they say to Mr. Manuel, "Are these your gloves?" And he basically muddies the answer.
At that point, they had a case against Samuel on the basis of recent possession in criminative circumstances. Raises a presumption in law that he was responsible for stealing them in the first place, or breaking in. Now, it's a ludicrous notion that Samuel Manuel went to break into the house, but at the end of the day, he didn't tell the truth.
Police, of course, would later deny Samuel's arrest was in any way intended to put pressure on his son, but it's difficult to see any other rationale behind it. And it worked. Manuel agreed to talk on one condition.
Police had made a deal with Peter. If he were to confess to the murders, his father would be set free.
How are you?
James and Teresa send their love.
Oh, aye. Send them mine. You alright there?
I'm fine.
Has he been released?
Not yet.
They will be.
Depends on you, Peter.
He better know it's his job or this carry on. My dad's one of the finest men at the gasworks.
Don't say a word, son. I'll be fine.
You want me to speak to your mother?
You shouldn't have come to a place like this, man.
Hey, he'll not be telling you a thing.
Samuel.
Coercion, that's what this is. I'll be talking to my solicitors.
Let me speak. I know it is lazy for you, telling us things. Maybe we've not always wanted to listen. But I'm here now.
Terrible things. I killed that girl in East Kilbride. And Isabel King. I shot the women in the house. All three of them. Once. That was me. And the family with a wee boy on New Year. I need know how these things happen. I need no way to do it.
Manuel's confession would seem to be exactly what the police needed to secure his conviction. After having time to contemplate his position, Manuel decided he would try and utilize the police tactics against them at the trial, alleging it was unlawful pressure that lay behind his confession.
It was a high-stakes gamble. Lose, he would hang. And Manuel wasn't done gambling yet. His trial began in Glasgow that May, but with the eyes of the nation on that court, Manuel couldn't resist seizing the focus. He sacked his lawyers. Once again, he would conduct his own defense.
Half the audience who have waited all night to get into court, half of them leave because they can't listen to it anymore, and he's there for 6 hours.
But he liked to talk, he liked the sound of his own voice, he believed he was in control of what was happening. Any lawyer who appears in court on a regular basis, as a profession, will say, asking questions is easy. The secret is to know which question to ask, and even more so, knowing when to sit and say nothing.
Manuel had the arrogance to think he could defend himself, and this was only bolstered by his two star witnesses, the people who had always given him an alibi, his parents.
His father was bullish and lied and gave him an alibi and basically just talked nonsense indignantly, which is the worst way to lie.
He said that it looked as if he'd been drugged or he'd been drinking. He didn't hear his son say anything in terms of confessions. Not a thing. The police made all this up.
The two of them think it's gone really well and they're both chortling and everyone in the court hates them. So he doesn't really have any idea how he's coming over.
I swear by Almighty God that I will tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Would you confirm your name for the court?
I'm Mrs. Bridget Manuel.
And your age?
54.
And you live at number 32 4th Street, Uddingston?
That's right.
And I also believe you are my mother. Then I'll turn it once, if I may, to the 16th of January this year. You were taken along with my father, your husband, to Hamilton Police Station. Is that correct?
Yes.
Did you know why?
We were told you wanted to read out a statement.
What did that statement concern?
A few crimes and a few mysteries about things that happened in Lanarkshire.
Did that statement mention any specific crimes?
No.
And did you hear me make any other statement to you?
You asked if we were all right.
And that was all.
You said you didn't know how these things happen or what made you do them.
What made you think I said that?
I heard you.
Could it not have been one of the police? Yeah.
I thought I heard you.
That could have been. Was it not one of the police you heard?
I thought it was you.
That's what I'm trying to get at. Is it a fact that you think you heard me say it, or that I did say it?
I don't know.
Did you definitively and plainly hear me say, I don't know what makes me do these things?
I heard you say it, Peter.
No one else hears him saying that. Father never ever gives evidence that he said that. The cops don't say that he said that. So is Mrs. Manuel making it up under oath because she feels that she has to protect people from her son? It's a really fascinating conflict.
I've never seen anything to suggest that she was other than at heart a decent woman. And must have been terribly torn by this desire to do something to help her son, and the realisation that he actually was beyond any kind of help that she could give.
She'd taken an oath on the Bible. Her loyalty really was to decency and telling the truth.
Simply as a human being, you might think your children had strayed, you might think they had done things that were wrong. But if your son or daughter sat in front of you and confessed to that kind of a crime, how would you react?
The jury were unconvinced by his claims about police coercion. The judge strategically instructed the jury to find Manuel not guilty of the murder of Neelands due to lack of evidence, although he was almost certainly responsible for it. The jury found him guilty of killing the Watt family, guilty of killing Isabel Cook, and guilty of killing the Smarts. Peter Manuel would hang. On the 11th of July, 1958, 31 years and 4 months after they'd seen him into the world, Manuel's parents were informed of his execution.